A very good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to St. Michael at the Northgate Church in Oxford, or at least the vestry of St. Michael's. And as you can see behind me, there are some wonderful pictures of some wonderful former vicars of this ancient church. Welcome this afternoon. I hope that your Monday has gone well. And we continue our series of 7 thoughts about interesting historical characters. And today it will be Sir Isaac Newton. And we're almost at 7:30. Sorry, 17:30, 5:30. So I will say we are at 5:30. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and for watching whenever and wherever. It's from St. Michael at the Northgate Church in Oxford, 7 thoughts about Isaac Newton. And I know that one or two of us like to see whom we're talking about. So if I can just hold up this picture now. That's one of the famous pictures of Sir Isaac Newton, born in 1642, the same year that the English Civil War broke out, and died in 1726. And what an era of history he lived through. Perhaps the most crucial moment was 1867, when he published a book, and I'll have to check I get this right, and forgive my pronunciation, you classical scholars, the Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, first published in 1687. And in this, he laid the foundations of so much that we take for granted in our mathematical and mechanical and physical understanding of the way the world works. He's a fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge, and he did all sorts of things, interested in so much. And then in 1665, the plague year, so this is well before he wrote this book, Cambridge closed down, because then, like now, pandemics have an effect. He closed down, he went back home, and he was really on his own for a couple of years. And he enjoyed solitude, we'll come back to that, and thinking things through. He also was a member of Parliament for 2 brief terms for the University of Cambridge, knighted by Queen Anne in 1705, and spent the last 3 decades of his life in London, when he was really a bit of a celebrity. Served as Warden and Master of the Royal Mint and President of the Royal Society. An establishment figure, fated by the rich and the famous, and knighted and seen as a great figure in his own right. So a mathematician whose work was truly valued. 7 brief thoughts. As ever, we go for quotations, either for him or in this case from some others, just to focus our thinking a little bit. First of all, his legacy. When he died, Westminster Abbey wanted to put up a monument to him, and it's a magnificent monument in Westminster Abbey, and they wondered what the epitaph should be. They went for something suitably solemn and respectable. But before they did that, the great poet Alexander Pope offered this as an epitaph. Nature and nature's law lay hid in night. God said, let Newton be, and all was light. There's a lot of truth in that, but it was seen as a bit too light-hearted for his epitaph in Westminster Abbey. Albert Einstein, in the last century, said about him, nature to him was an open book. He stands before us, strong, certain, and alone. He did so much to increase understanding of calculus, of light, of gravity, how planets work. Apparently, whenever we receive a satellite signal for our phone or TV, whatever it might be, that's because those who developed satellites were following Newton's understanding of the gravitational pull of various planets, especially Earth, of course, and so on. Navigation as well. If you know how the planets move, then you're able to navigate across the Atlantic. His legacy was huge. If we had time, we'd talk about that. If I could just recommend a wonderful book, 12 Books That Changed the World by Melvyn Bragg, he touches on Newton. That's the first one that he talks about. So first point, his legacy was very substantial. The second thing is this, he liked to ask why. And he said it's great to dream, but we need evidence. We need to ask why. He says this, we are certainly not to relinquish the evidence of experiments for the sake of dreams and vain fictions of our own devising, nor are we to recede from the analogy of nature, which is wont to be simple and always consonant to itself. He believed that nature had its own inner coherence. It was always consonant to itself, and the good scientist would always be looking for the evidence. He says this: God created everything by number, weight, and measure. We'll come back to the faith part. God created everything, but the number, weight, and measure. He felt that if you asked the question why long enough and looked hard at the evidence long enough, you could work out why things happen, including why does an apple fall from a tree? Why does it not fall sideways or go upwards? Why does it fall? Now, all of us have experienced apples falling from trees and other things falling off desks and so on. Newton had the sort of mind that not only he wanted to ask why, like any good child would always ask the why question, but he also believed that you could find out the answer to the why. And that seemed to be one of the areas which set him apart, not from lots of other wonderful searching scientists as well, but just he sometimes seemed to operate on a different plane, and certainly from the majority of the population on that. He felt the why could be answered. He was actually rather strange, and it shows that one can change the world while still being a bit strange. One of his experiments was pushing a blunt needle. This is not to be tried at home, health and safety moment, pushing a blunt needle between the eyeball and the socket, and the bone as near to the backside of my eye as I can, and pressing my eye with the end of it, there appear white, dark, and coloured circles. Not entirely a surprise. Which circles are plainest when I continue to rub my eye with the point of it. He did say after that he needed to take to his bed for a couple of weeks for his eyes to recover. It is quite a strange thing to do in the advancement of scientific inquiry. He wanted to know what happened and why, and what colours and shapes might be seen by the eye. We won't try that at home. He was slightly strange socially as well. It was said that he would occasionally ask friends to supper, but he was quite fond of solitude. He'd invite friends to supper, and then one of them, then maybe he'd offer one another drink. He'd be given the glass, go out to refill it, and wouldn't come back to the dining room. They'd go and find him, and the empty glass would be forgotten, and there would Isaac Newton be studying over his papers again at his desk, had completely forgotten that his friends were there. He also could lose his temper terribly and made a lot of enemies. He was sometimes quite competitive, didn't always handle relationships well, but mathematically and in other ways, he was a genius. Let's just go to the faith part. He says this: as a blind man has no idea of colours, so have we no idea of the manner by which the all-wise God perceives and understands all things. There are more sure marks of authenticity in the Bible than in any profane history. Christ comes as a thief in the night, and it is not for us to know the times and seasons which God hath put into his own breast. So there's an interesting balance here. He feels that there are some things that God knows and we do not, but he also feels there are things in the natural world created by God. God created everything by number, weight, and measure, that it is totally fine for us to try and work out the answer to the why. In recent years, there's been a little bit of a division between religion and science, according to some. Perhaps it's good to remember that through most of history, there's been no such division, and great scientists from the Muslim tradition, from the Christian tradition, who believed in a God who had set everything up, who had created everything, and the scientists wanted to know how he had done it. And Isaac Newton was very much in that category. He wasn't an entirely orthodox Christian, and he refused to become a priest. And in those days, you were meant to, if you were a fellow at Cambridge, you wouldn't go there, but he publicly upheld his belief in a creator God. It's a little bit like as if we saw a wonderful painting, say the Mona Lisa, and we looked at it and we knew that Leonardo da Vinci had painted it, and we wanted to know how he had painted it. A perfectly legitimate question to ask. For Newton, looking at the world and saying it just somehow came into being accidentally, It's like saying the Mona Lisa just came into being accidentally. We may look at a wonderful painting, know that there was a painter behind it, the how he did it, the how long it took the painter to do it, the brush strokes, etc. That may be fun to find out, but we can believe that it was a painter behind it. Newton was in that tradition that felt there was a God that created the world, and it's fun scientifically to work out, to try and find out how he did it, how the world works. And then human nature. I said earlier that he wasn't terribly good socially and would sometimes offend people, but he was in some ways quite understanding and knew what needed to be done. We build too many walls and not enough bridges. And perhaps if I can just say, in our present time, and I was chatting with a friend this afternoon about our inability to listen to each other sometimes in our society, people of different views, of different questions. It's so easy to build walls. And Newton would say, let's build bridges, then we can learn more. He did say, I can calculate the motion of heavenly bodies, but not the madness of people. He wasn't always terribly patient. I mentioned earlier that he was a genius. I use that word. I use it slightly carefully because Newton himself says, genius is patience. And he put a great deal of what he achieved down to his determination and commitment. My powers are ordinary. Only my application brings me success. If I have done the public any service, it is due to my patient thought. Someone said, how did he find out about gravity? By thinking on it continuously. There was a moment when he was fairly young, when he bought a prism of glass from a traveling fair, and he took it home and he realized that white light shone into it, refracted into different colors. And of course, lots of people have seen that, and it's great fun to do it. Apparently, the understanding at the time was there is something in the glass that refracted the white into the different colors. Newton wasn't quite satisfied with that explanation, and through constant experimenting and thinking continuously on it, and patience and application, he felt no light itself is formed of these different colors. And then we receive it at white, as white. And so his understanding of how light works, his determination to work out why hitting the prism then changes it, then led to a great number of developments, discoveries in the whole optical field. And lastly, he was sometimes very arrogant and competitive to others. He understood that he was a popular and famous figure, and that doesn't always play terribly well. But there was also quite a strong streak of humility in him. His very famous phrase, used by others as well, if I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants. Whatever we may be called to achieve, it's always good to acknowledge the giants on whose shoulders we stand, and that heritage behind us. And then this, I do not know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore and diverting myself in now and then, finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. The great ocean of truth lay all undiscovered before me. There's always more that we can learn. But the little boy playing by the seashore, diverting myself in now and then finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary. It's a moving and a good image. It's also perhaps a little bit poignant because Isaac Newton's childhood was not the happiest, and he was often on his own and had to make up his own amusements. And perhaps when he was much older and reflecting on his scientific achievements, just that picture of the little boy on his own, playing by himself on the beach, looking for smoother pebbles because there weren't others around to play with. Maybe that's part of what was going on there. So those were the 7 on Isaac Newton. As ever, so much more that could be said. His legacy is huge. Nature and nature's law lay hid in sight. God said, let Newton be, and all was was light. Einstein, nature to him was an open book. The fact that he wanted evidence and he felt that things could be found out, the why could be answered. The fact he was a little bit odd, and the needle in the eye thing, and the not always treating friends well. The fact of his faith in God as the creator and prime mover of all things, and that in no way compromised his science, more it enhanced and strengthened his scientific enthusiasm. His understanding of human nature and the need to build bridges rather than walls. Maybe he was speaking to himself there. His extraordinary determination. He really wanted to know answers and would spend weeks, months, years pondering questions. Why does the apple fall? Why does the light refract? Where is our determination and commitment and patience application like that? And his poignant humility. He knew he was standing on the shoulders of giants and sometimes thought he was once again just a little child, seeking, looking, enjoying something interesting. Before I say my normal farewells, could I say that next week we're not going to be streaming during the week, just going to have a bit of a pause and a regroup and think which ones seem to be most helpful during the week and which ones maybe not so helpful. And so if you do want to watch anything, do have a little bit of a look at the back catalogue, as it were, on YouTube of previous streams. And if you have any thoughts as to which ones you think are valuable, or if you only watch the Monday ones, whether you think that's worth continuing or not, we love honest feedback. And my email is either somewhere here or on the St. Michael's website. So do let us know what you think. But in the meantime, thank you so much for being with us tonight, and all the very best for the rest of the evening. Thank you.